Well, welcome back to another episode of Buffalo Happy Hour. Mike, what's going on?
And Derek, we are back at our friends over at Addie's Fine Wine and Spirits. I am back for this interview, so it's very exciting.
Oh, yeah.
Since last time I had to abandon you, so I apologize. But yeah, so obviously a shout out to Addie's. Thank you again for hosting us and allowing us to use your tasting room. We greatly appreciate you and all that you do for the community and new brands. So we should probably start with introductions and titles, I suppose, if that's how you wanted to roll. And then we'll dive into your story.
Yeah, well, great. Cheers, boys, for having me. Delighted to be here, sharing some whiskey. But my name's Tim Hurley. I'm founder and janitor and blender and anything else that needs to be done at Lost Irish. So Lost Irish is a very new whiskey. Just came out in the world in December. And because New York is the centre of the world, that's where we started.
There you go.
But it is from Ireland, and I'll tell you a lot more about the liquid in a second. But yeah, it's a new Irish whiskey, and welcome to the inner circle of all things Lost Irish.
That's awesome. Well, cheers, man. Thank you so much for being on. We appreciate it, and we're excited.
Great. This is awesome.
So the term Lost Irish, the name of the company, how did that start?
So I got very obsessed with Irish pubs, and like back home, we just called them pubs, right?
Yeah, right.
So, but growing up in Ireland, whenever you go on holidays with your family, and we'd always explore, but I'd always end up going to an Irish pub. And I was really fascinated with, why are there Irish bars everywhere? Mm-hmm. You go to Italy, you go to France, you go even further afield, and it very quickly emerged to me, it's not the British pub, it's not the German beer hall, the French have their cafes, the Italians their restaurants, but the Irish pub is very much the world's favourite watering hole. And I got obsessed with this. So in a past career, I did 50 pubs in 30 days, 50 states in 30 days, looking for the best Irish pubs around America. So I did that. I did a pub book with friends of mine back home. And I went to some mad places like Mongolia, Nepal, going to different Irish pubs. And when I was doing this, I was like, there's some really cool stories here. And I don't know when, why exactly. I think I was in Mongolia, but I termed the phrase Lost Irish. I was like, it's this story of Irish people abroad. Like, Ireland's very much the world's biggest small country. There's 5 million at home, there's 70 million worldwide, 35 million in America. We're very productive when we travel. It's probably the message there. And I just had this name, Lost Irish, and I was like, that would be a great name for a cocktail. Thankfully, I came up with a really shitty cocktail, but I kept the name. And when time came to do my own Irish whiskey, I was like, no, Lost Irish is the name, but really it's the concept as well. And it's the story of every Irish bar abroad. It's the story of every Irish person abroad. And really it's the story of any kind of wanderer, adventurer, or explorer. Like, you go on Bumble, Tinder, whatever dating app, you always hear travel.
Yeah, right, yeah, really.
and it's tapping into that adventure spirit as well.
So what would you say, just based off of the book and your travels, what is the best or the most unique country or state that really encapsulates Irish pubs to the best that you can imagine?
Yeah, Florida's probably one of the weirdest in terms of the spectrum. And this brilliant place called Fly Sty is like a beach pub, a beach bar meets an Irish bar, and you never see that. Quiet, dark pub, but the beer garden is like this hippies beach bar.
And that's in Florida?
That's in Jacksonville, Florida.
Wow.
And then you have some really colourful places. There's a Thatch pub in Tampa, a Thatch cottage that's a pub called Four Green Fields, and it just looks totally out of place. You have McGuire's in Pensacola, which is this enormous restaurant with a dollar bill. You know the way you see dollar bills on pubs? People will sign it. They have so many dollar bills in McGuire's that every year when they do their accounts, that they take a set square to take a sample. And there's something like 1.5 million worth of single dollar bills on the ceilings and on the walls. So,
Oh my gosh.
Imagine if it was a strip club.
Right, yeah, really. So what made you write the book in the first place? Just to capture all of your adventures?
No, so my friends, I'm a co-author on, it's called From Barley to Blarney, A Whiskey Lover's Guide to Ireland. And it's my friends from the Dead Rabbit, Sean Muldoon and Jack McGarry, myself and them, and a writer, Conor Kelly, we're always getting asked, listen, I'm going to Ireland next week. Where do I need to go? And we thought this would make our lives a whole lot easier. Plus, we thought it'd be a really good trip and holiday at home to visit all these pubs. And we'd been doing that for research anyway, whether it's the guys who...
research.
Yeah, well, so the guy, if for anyone that hasn't been to the Dead Rabbit in Manhattan in New York, it is one of the world's best Irish pubs. It's an Irish pub meets top-end mixology. And it's 3 floors, but very tight, very cozy. First floor is it's called the tap room. It is a pub. You feel like you're walking into a pub in Belfast. And then the second floor is high-end cocktails that would have won world's best cocktail bar. And I'd be going back to Ireland to visit distilleries. The guys would be going back to visit pubs. We'd meet each other at home the whole time. And classic, where the idea come from, obviously it was in a bar. And we were like, we should do this. And we all said it out loud. And then maybe a few weeks later, it's like, we serious about this? And how do we go about it? And a few years later, we were able to put together this book. So 50 of the old school hidden gem pubs back home, profiles of 31 distilleries. There's now 40 plus distilleries in Ireland, but there's a really good background on those 31. And then the Dead Rabbit being the Dead Rabbit. There's also 12 cocktails from Jack McGarry in the book as well.
Gotcha.
All Irish whiskey-based cocktails. Yeah.
Is it all throughout the country of Ireland, or was it a specific spot?
Oh, all throughout the country. You can't talk about and sell Ireland with if it's only about Dublin.
Sure.
So yeah, we did a 2-month. We did 2 1-month tours of Ireland, and we would have done a lot of research before that as well. And we're from Ireland, but we went to 111 pubs to do full-on photo shoots and interviews. And then we cut that down to 50. And we got to 40 pretty quickly. And then we fought forever on the final 10. So,
But did you go to Northern Ireland at all?
yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so the 2 lads are from Belfast.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So Belfast has I'm not going to say Belfast has a great representation, because that implies that they got in there using a handicap. No, Belfast is well represented because the pubs there are brilliant.
Sure. What's the dynamic between Ireland and Northern Ireland? Because you're closer to that border, right?
Yeah, well, my family home is on the border in the Republic of Ireland, but it depends on who you're chatting to. Like, there's people in Ireland that see Ireland as Ireland is an island, one island. Depending on who you are, you might argue that it's one nation or 2 nations on that island. So, depending on what side of that argument, and it's not always about religion. In fact, I think today, given Brexit and the European Union, it's very much away from the religion argument of Protestant and Catholic dynamics. It never really was about that. It was whether it was to be reunited with Ireland, or whether it was those that identified more being part of Great Britain, or if it was others that just wanted, listen, I want none of this.
Sure, right, exactly.
So, yeah, but it's an interesting dynamic in terms of like growing up on the border and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's always fascinating. I mean, I didn't know the difference. I mean, I know that there's obviously Northern and regular, but I don't know any of the history behind it.
Yeah. Is that dynamic now more prevalent with the hatred for Great Britain across the nation?
Well, like, we've always had a bit of a beef with Great Britain, and really the English. So it's when you occupy 25% of the planet through invasion, there's not a lot to like about that.
Right.
So I think you can gather where my feelings are.
I'm with you. That's incredible. I love that.
So you grew up in that area. Do you have a facility where you're blending the whiskey? Is that in Ireland, or is that stateside?
Oh, yeah, it's in Ireland.
Okay. Yeah, so start from the top on how this whole thing came about, because you were a brand rep for a little bit, and then all of a sudden you're just like, nope, doing my own thing.
So my whiskey career began with a company called the Cooley Distillery. So they have, at one point in Ireland, there was only 2 distilleries. and Cooley was the third that opened in 1986. And like 3 distilleries in Ireland from the country that invented whiskey is ridiculous. Like at one point we had 2,000 distilleries, and then we went down to 2, and then for a long time we had 3 in terms of our generation. Today there's 40, which is great, but a lot of those distilleries are so young they don't have spirit old enough to be called whiskey.
Sure.
And that's going to change, and you're getting lots more interesting whiskies, different points of view on new styles of Irish whiskey. So it's really exciting. With me, I started with Cooley, so I was working on Kilbeggan, Connemara, Tyrconnell, and that was me being very green and learning. Thankfully, they were very patient, and I went back to Ireland and worked with my dad's family business, which is an egg farm, totally unrelated. We'll do a separate pod for that. And then the fine folks at Tullamore Dew were looking for a US ambassador, and I raised my hand, not expecting to get it, and I did. And I spent 9.5 years building and representing Tullamore Dew all across the US and building a brand ambassador program to help the cause and spread the word and do cool events and meet bartenders, drinkers and the like. And I had a really, really good run. Like I did some amazing things like that, 50 states in 30 days looking for the best Irish pubs around America. I was on the Steve Harvey show. I did the world's biggest Irish coffee. I was also Toastmaster General for the world's shortest St. Patrick's Day parade and the world's biggest pub crawl, which was in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I've done amazing, amazing things. And it got to the point where I was like, I've done this. This has been best years of my life. But maybe I should do something different. And I've had this idea of, well, I'd like to come out with my own whiskey. But that was built on, there's a whiskey idea that I have that nobody's doing. And I'd like to bring that to the world. And I have a concept that I'd like to work on. And if I don't do it now, I never will. So that was when I decided, okay, I'm going to shake hands, thank everybody, but go do my own thing. So February 7th, 2020 was my last day, and what could go wrong? We sit here in 2022. There's a spoiler alert.
Yep.
The world could end with a pandemic, so I wasn't expecting that. Took that kind of personally. You know, a bit of universal karma hitting me there, but, you know, wasn't all directed at me, but or at all. And it gave me a lot of time to work on 2 things, the packaging development, but also building this whiskey concept. So, like, we've talked about Lost Irish like it's bigger than a whiskey, and how it's a way of life, or how it's an attitude, or how it exists in Irish pubs. But when it comes to this whiskey, there's 3 whiskey styles in Ireland: grain, malt and pot still. So grain for sweetness, malt will give you that kind of fruity note. It's non-peated, so no smoke. And then pot still whiskey, like a redbreast or a green spot, creamy made texture, like tons of spice to it. So I combine those 3 together. But and that's the Irish bit of Lost Irish. But the Lost bit is I take casks from 6 continents, bring them back to Ireland to do the maturation and finishing. And which is really difficult to do during COVID when you can't travel.
I bet.
So yeah,
6 different countries.
Yeah.
Wow.
And and I always tell people 70% of a whiskey's flavour comes from the barrels. And I'm also a believer in more is more. So the more barrels I can get, the more flavours I can build in. And so the casks are bourbon from North America, sherry from Jerez in Spain. Nothing unusual there. But there's also Australian Tony, South African brandy, Colombian Jamaican rum, and Japanese Mizunara oak.
Ooh.
So bring them all to Ireland. And all 3 styles grow up in bourbon barrels. So all your grain, malt, and pot still grows up in bourbon barrels. Then I'll separate it out, do a finish. For the Japanese Mizunara oak, it's 14 months because the barrels are bigger.
Sure.
It needs more time to get that liquid to wood surface ratio right. So it just needs more time as a finish. And then the others will be typically 6 months or 8 months. So the Australian Tony, South African brandy, Colombian Jamaican rum, and just waiting until they're ready to take on the flavour from each of them and then I'll select different proportions from each of those barrels to come up with the final blend. So while each cask is contributing something different, it's designed to be blended together so that some of it greater than the sum of its parts, and it has a nice balance to it. It sounds like it could be a very disjointed whiskey because there's that going on,
Sure.
there's this going on, but the idea is that the blend just brings it all together so that you get this fruity on the nose whiskey, friendly, sweet, but you'll get these spices, rummy raisin notes in the finish as well.
I was going to say, so you have, this one bottle has all of those barrels in it.
Yeah.
Because when you taste this doesn't taste like a typical Irish whiskey.
No, and I'm trying to figure out, like,
That makes more sense now.
where in the world are the barrels coming from in Australia? Like north, south, east, west?
Yeah, it's a Victoria area. So it's because like when you think of Australia, amazing grapes. And actually same with South Africa. That's why I really wanted a South African brandy cask.
Okay. Where's Victoria's region? Because I know Queensland is northeast.
Yeah, so it'll be southeast.
Southeast?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because then everything west is desert.
Yes. Yeah.
Right, that's why I was like super confused. I'm just like, what is happening here?
Please forgive us, all the West Australian listeners right now. Like desert in an interesting way.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So-
I gotcha. But either way, it's desert.
Yeah.
And they don't mince words either, so they can handle it.
Yeah.
The
Very
Aussies
true.
are awesome.
Yeah.
So, and then with it, so now since it's 2022 and you started this whole endeavor essentially in Feb 2020, have you gone to these separate regions to try to configure the cooperages and things like that you're trying to get the barrels from?
Yeah, sure. During COVID, before COVID kicked along, right, I had all these dreams that I'd go to these different facilities, whether wineries or distilleries, and select casks or work with the makers to pick those barrels. Because it was COVID, I still got to make direct contact with them, but it was them showing a laptop with a camera, like dipping the laptop into the barrel.
Oh, God.
Where you wish you had smell-o-vision or something.
Right, yeah,
It was-
really.
And it's like,
Scratch and sniff the screen.
Yeah. But it was like through working with people directly or sometimes with brokers to get those different casks to Ireland. And not every cast worked, by the way.
Sure.
Because when you're like, it's the first time ever for Irish whiskey as an industry to release South African brandy casks, Australian Tony. They're two firsts. Colombian rum, I believe, is the first.
I was going to say, I've heard of Japanese Mizunara, right?
Yes.
That's been a few. But have you ever, when you were doing this and you have these 6 barrels, did you ever think, let's try these 3 and then these 3? Or was it always, let's put all 6 and see how it tastes?
Yeah, there were other barrels as well.
Sure.
And I had an initial prototype. So the distillery I work with, there's bourbon barrels readily accessible. There's sherry casks readily accessible. There's also Jamaican rum casks, if you ask nicely, readily accessible. And they have other stuff too. But I'm a whiskey geek first and foremost. And when I had, if you're going to call it something Lost Irish, I was like, you really better live up to that term, So I was like, okay, initially the idea was, well, why don't I do like a different vintage? And, maybe it's Lost in Australia is a vintage. And then I was just like, well, what that's great for the vintage, but what will I do as our flagship, as our core? And that was really when it's like, well, you have all these really cool barrels here and you're working with them and you're inspecting them and most of them are performing. There's a couple that at the time I wasn't sure if they would or not, and some didn't. And it was like, no, if this is going to be Lost Irish and it's working out to play out to be a great whiskey, let's do that. And it was very much the idea of the more paint you have, the more interesting of a painting you can pick or draw. You can take a picture of. And it's like, okay, here are our colors. Let's get painting and see what happens. So, and there was yes, South African brandy is a first, but I tasted cognac finished whiskies, and yes, they're different, but then there's a range there that you're like, okay, I know roughly how this will act. Similar with Australian Tony, it's their version of port. So you have an expectation of what that will taste like. The Japanese Mizunara oak, we weren't the first to do that. So I had a rough expectation of what that would bring. And while the Colombian rum and the Jamaican rum are totally different, Colombian rum is very sweet, bubblegum sweet, whereas the Jamaican rum is like funky, spicy, real interesting cast to play with there. So,
and I'm assuming it's not an even split, right? It's not equal of everything.
Yeah, and when you're bringing the barrels over, you don't know. You don't know what the proportions are going to be until you wait, and that's why I keep them separate so you can see exactly what that cask brings. And when I was making this blend for the first time, you're making the best whiskey you can possibly, right? So I remember very clearly, it was like, okay, this is tasting well, but I'm not really happy with the nose. Like I wanted to have more fruit notes to it. And I was there with the cask and I was like, okay, I know the South African brandy cask will like big pineapple, apple pear.
That's exactly what I'm tasting with this, is apple pear, just nice green apple.
So I was like, let's dial that up.
Yeah.
Or I was looking for a bit more sweetness.
It is sugary.
In the entry, so I was like, okay, let's get the Australian Tony in there because I know that will bring like jammy, dried fruits, those kind of notes. So let's add that to the mix. The problem is when you're like, okay, I want more of this, more of that, you have to take away something. So doing that at first initial blend there's a lot of trade-offs when you're doing it. And when you have so many component parts to your whiskey, you're making it very difficult for yourself, but with a reason. And here's our outcome. And then the second time, it's the difficult second album. Because the first time you just make the whiskey the best you can from what you have. Whereas the second time, you also have older stock. And you're like, well, do I make the best whiskey I can? Or do I balance that off with consistency to what people have tried for the first time and like? So there's that kind of balance at play. So every time you're doing production, you're still not doing it for the first time, but it's not like recipe. It's like let's see where we are today, and let's see how the casks have evolved. Are our proportions going to change to get to the flavor profile we want? So there's a lot of considerations. It is a pain in the arse.
Oh yeah,
right.
But it's fun.
Which you said you have 3 total employees, including you.
Yes.
Okay, so everyone's wearing like a gajillion hats.
Yeah, but our team are based in the US. So we've Donna Stewart, who's in California. She's from Ireland, and she runs the show in California. I have Jack, who's also joining me in Buffalo later tonight, and he's based in Austin, Texas, and he runs the show in Texas. And then we're only in California, Texas, New York, Illinois, and Florida. And then we're launching in Ireland next month. So that's going to be really cool.
It's going to be sweet.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, so like family affair. It's going to be more than a family affair, but for the family, all our families, it's a really cool thing to happen.
So this could be me just not fully understanding of Irish whiskey. In America, we have MGP is like the Mecca. Everybody that blends gets their stuff from MGP. Is there something similar in Ireland, or are you going to different distilleries in Ireland and saying, can I have 7 of your barrels because I'm blending something?
Right.
Yeah, you can do that. You can do both.
Okay.
Is the answer. When I left Tullamore Dew and I knew what I wanted to do, I called a gentleman who was initially my college lecturer. He was also the first guy to hire me in whiskey. His name is John Teeling. His sons own the Teeling Distillery, but he owns a different distillery, which I guess you could call the MGP of Ireland. It's different, but you could call it that. And I was like, John, here's what I want to do. And he's like, I'll make sure you have grain whiskey, malt whiskey, and pot still, and you'll always have bourbon and sherry casks at the distillery, amongst others. But if if you're looking at executing Lost Irish as a 6-continent cask, maturation and finish, if you can get those casks, I'll make sure you have the warehouse space and the liquid to do your blending. And I knew he wouldn't have those casks. Nobody.
Sure,
had those
yeah,
casks.
right.
So I was like, perfect. Exactly what I wanted to hear. It's also 20 minutes away from my family home. So it was an obvious place and people for me to work with.
So when you got these different casks, are you bringing it to him and be like, can you fill this?
Yeah.
Okay, that's sweet.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
And then he's like, well, you brought those casks. I haven't inspected them. You pay for the whiskey first before it goes into them. Which is totally fair.
Absolutely, 100%.
yeah.
That's a risk. I mean, with all the continents that you have there, that has to be a risk that went through your mind. Like, will pot still whiskey mature well with Australian Tony barrels?
Yeah. And there's the twisted bit of it is we've a couple of casks that are in those barrels for forever. So that we know that when is too long. So there's a bit of when you're blending and making a recipe or a whiskey, you're making the best you can, but you're also disproving the theory. It's like a hypothesis in science. Like, you have to disprove it too. So I'm also trying to figure out how long is too long in these barrels, and it's a journey we don't quite know yet. So, because what if it gets better? Or so it's a fact finding bit of information, but it's a fact finding bit of information with the end goal being failure, and then
Sure.
But it's failure in terms of the outcome of liquid, but it's success in terms of now I know.
Right.
So it's a quest for answers.
Which is really cool because in the bourbon side, on our side of the pond, most people say that generally 30 to 35 years is the max for a bourbon cask before it's just shot. And you're not going to get anything more from the barrel, and then you're just going to essentially ruin what could be something great. So they just kind of pull it from that in this regard because it's coming from a totally different region too. Like we were talking with another head distiller with barometric pressure and how it all affects barrels. Something in Australia might age totally different. Well, I'm sure it does age totally different than it does in the U.S., which is fascinating because from your perspective, which with, like I was saying earlier, with 3 employees, everybody's wearing different hats. You're a head distiller, you're also like a brand rep, and then you're in sales, and you're just like running back of house things with spreadsheets, which that's his world. Like, it's just got to be insane to try to fathom how you can pull so much from A because you know B and C are also coming down the pipeline and how that could affect your same juice.
Yeah.
So with Lost Irish launching, and you have 2 other people on other sides of the country, essentially, how does that look in Ireland when you're launching in Ireland? You said it's a family affair. Does that mean they're actually going to help drive product, or are you just kind of like assuming that they're going to do that?
No. The reason we're so excited, Jack, Donna, and I, and my co-founder Neil, he's based in Ireland.
Okay.
And it's exciting because the 3 of us in the US, we've always worked in whiskey in America as a rep, an ambassador, a salesperson. So we're real excited to go back and sell it, introduce Ireland to it as well, particularly because we released it here first. So there's been hype back home. It's like an Irish whiskey that's gone to America before it's come out in Ireland. What are you doing?
It's almost sacrilegious.
Yeah, but it's made people in Ireland excited about it too. So, and we're excited to bring it to the enthusiasts who want to see it as well. And if it's a reason to bring us home every now and again to work the market and see our families, we're all about it. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So,
why not?
So you have the unfortunate job of tasting all of this stuff to blend it together.
Yeah.
Do you have a barrel that you prefer? I don't want to say I prefer because all of it's obviously good juice, but do you like the Colombian rum over the Austrian? Like, what is your preferred barrel for your stuff?
Yeah, and there's some times where like I think the Japanese Mizunara oak is a brilliant blending tool. You're like, okay, to me it's quite one-dimensional. And I'm like, okay, we will take those notes, put it in the whiskey. Would I like this whiskey as a sold Japanese Mizunara oak? Probably not. No, but I like using it in the blend. Whereas the South African brandy by itself, I'm like, that could be released as a standalone whiskey. Nothing more needed
That's cool.
to do, and it works that way. So yeah,
That's fascinating.
yeah,
Because, I mean, those three, at least those three of those barrels haven't been explored before, really.
Yeah.
So you're tasting this and you're like, I could potentially be the first to release it on its own. Has that run through your mind, single barrels and doing all that stuff, or is that not on your plate yet?
Well, of course it's ran through my mind, but the whiskey enthusiast is always, like yourselves, always asking questions or like, what would this be like? And let's release it. And I have to be very, very disciplined in terms of what actually makes it into a bottle, because Lost Irish is still brand spanking new to pretty much everybody. And I really want people to love Lost Irish, our core, our flagship, the original. And if we release too many things too soon, people be like, oh, I love Lost Irish. And did you try this one-off release? And it's like, well, I kind of want you to love this first. And then when the time comes for us to do something different, we'll do it. But I don't want to do it for the sake of it. I really want to wait until we've something special to release it.
Sure.
So I'm not really searching for new releases. I'm searching for new learning, experimentation, and understanding. But I will definitely wait probably 3 years to do another release.
Sure.
And it'd have to make sense.
Right.
So let's hammer this one. It's 40 ABV, so 80 proof.
Correct.
It's great. It's
Thank you.
there's there's a lot of wood sugars, there's a lot of fruit, and it's mellow. It's not insane. The burn is almost null and void. It sits on your tongue really well. It's not super viscous. It's not really oily.
I want to just make one stipulation to that, because in 80 proof, people associate it with being a weak whiskey.
Yeah.
This is nowhere near weak.
Yeah,
like
no.
it still gives you tingles. It still like warms your mouth. It warms your body. Like
It's pleasant.
If you taste it, I honestly didn't think it was 40 proof or 40 ABV at first. I thought that this was like 45.
Which is
like
weird.
90. I thought
it's
that
so
for sure.
hard with Irish whiskey,
Yeah.
dude, because like with bourbon, it's almost obvious. And then with
Yes.
Irish whiskey, you're just like, hold on, this is 120 proof. Like that happened to us where it was a blended joint project with another Irish whiskey distillery. And I'm just like blown away. I was like, hold on, like that. We can't pour this. Like we have to, it's almost bad to smell it.
Yeah.
So I'm fascinated by that. And then from the other specifics that we should hammer and know about your flagship, like let's just go in depth on your flagship so everyone across the board understands.
Yeah, so it's 40% ABV. It is matured and finished in casks from 6 continents. Those casks are bourbon, sherry, Japanese Mizunara oak, Australian Tony, South African brandy, Colombian Jamaican rum. And it's a blend of 3 Irish whiskey styles, grain malt and pot still. And voila, you put it all together, you get Lost Irish, with the idea of it being fruity, friendly, but like it's real easy to do like a smooth and friendly flavorless whiskey. I wanted it to be packed full of flavor, and really that's what the casks are doing.
Yeah, you crushed that.
Yeah. And green bottles matter.
Right, yeah. So we do Wednesday whiskey reviews every week, and part of that analysis is label branding. That's one of our aspects
cool.
that we touch on.
Well, I'd love to.
Real cork.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I spent a day with corks looking for that. Oh yeah,
See?
that's the acoustic.
That makes me so much happier knowing that they think of it too. Because when we're sitting there and we open something, we don't hear a sound. I'm like, see, this is terrible. We need something else.
And like we'll geek out over design for a second. Like a pour spout fits perfectly in there.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's not one of those where it fits, but it's too loose and it dribbles all the way down your
Sure.
hand, which is like the
The
ultimate
worst.
tease, you know. And the grip on the bottle, like this lip,
I love that too.
we call it the grip lip. We need a better name, but it's designed for a bartender that you can pick it up, and it feels pretty good. Very proud of the name Lost Irish. It is obnoxiously big here with the embossed.
I love
And
it.
it's off of the bottle, so it's not.
Yes, it's raised.
It's raised.
Yeah, and then even little details like this. So you see the 6 holes represent 6 continents.
barrels, yeah.
Yep.
I love that.
And you'll see the 3, the 6, and you'll see the barrels listed here. The bit where I went tragically wrong, and it cost me a month to 6 weeks of production time, is our motto is get lost, stay lost. And on the base of the bottle, it says get lost, stay lost. And if you squint really hard, you still can't see it.
Yeah, it's a little tough.
It's a little tough. But yeah, it, like playing with design, that's what COVID did. It gave us extra time to work on this. And if you're going to come up with a whiskey or a brand and hope for it to be iconic, I really think to give yourself a start or a chance of that, I think you need a custom bespoke bottle. Not necessarily in the beginning, but at some point, if you want that behind the back bar or quick, like side of your eye in a liquor store, I think these cues are really important.
So the green bottle, was that just for that reason, to stand out, or is there more of a scientific reason behind
Here we
the
go.
green bottle?
Derek's on this quest to figure out if green bottles scientifically improve the fluid that's within it.
Right? Is this like the beer
Yes.
bottle technique?
I
of
love green
sunlight
bottle
and
beer
stuff like
matter.
that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No. But
Not at all.
not at all.
Take off your shirt, Derek. It's not helping that either.
But green, everyone, when it comes to Irish whiskey, mentally we assume there's a lot of green bottles. But when you look at it, there really isn't. And a lot of the new brands are clear.
Yeah.
Like, I'm always amazed. If you look at bourbon bottles or American whiskey bottles, they're all clear. For the love of God, would somebody please release a black bottle or blue or green or a different color? And I do get like seeing the whiskey is cool. But I always notice it on bourbon bottles that if you're in a bar and let's say Woodford Reserve, I didn't want to call out anyone, but let's say Woodford Reserve, you have the screen print, the white, but when Woodford's drank down to here, to 25% of the bottle, you don't have the backdrop of the color of the bourbon to let the white pop, so you can't read it.
Sure, that's a good point.
And with Lost Irish, I was like, okay, there's very few green bottles. There's like Connemara, there's Redbreast, there's Jameson. After that, there's Proper 12. After that, there's not really a lot of green bottles.
Not until you get into like Scotch. You're right.
Yeah. And the way we have our label, I knew I wanted to do so this Lost Irish, embossing, popping off the bottle, that 3D effect. If this was on a clear bottle, it wouldn't look that good, particularly when it's down to here. So I wanted the green to be the backdrop. And like green, Ireland.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's white font and then it's an orange label.
Yeah.
So you're kind of hammering the flag.
Yes.
Cheers.
Well, too, with Irish whiskey, it's generally lighter in color. So if it's on the shelf next to a bourbon, people are going to be like, what's wrong with that? Because people don't understand what Irish whiskey is.
Why is your whiskey hydrated?
Right, yeah, seriously. So I think it being a green bottle is amazing. Like, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
And is there packaging? Is it just the bottle?
It's just a bottle.
Okay.
And
it's $40.
Yeah.
We have to talk about that. It's $40. Me and Derek have this conversation weekly where we literally talk about how from $20 to $50, there's just unbelievable options. And then from 50 to 100, like there's a huge gap there in regards to numbers. But from a value standpoint, what are you really gaining?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But from 20 to 50, there's such an insane selection from across the world. And you're like, damn, I could have got that for $40.
Yeah.
And it's almost sometimes better than the $80 bottle.
Very true.
It's fascinating.
Really true. Like if we were to play that game where we're just looking at liquids, you would be amazed how little price is the factor in it.
Yeah.
Now, there's often reasons why they're priced like that, whether it's packaging or it was an experimental release and they don't have the same volume of it. There's a bit of rarity to it. But with this, I wanted it to be like, we spent a lot of time focusing on Irish pubs and cocktail bars. And I very much wanted it to be affordable to use in a cocktail if you wanted. And there's only so far you can go with a price point on that.
And not to cut you off, Derek, sorry. The other point too is your bottle is a very unique shape. So is your cork, and glass and corks are currently kind of an interesting, fun endeavor to go about. So obviously once this podcast goes live, you guys are going to go viral. So in that, are you trying to prepare, especially because of that launch in Ireland, how that'll look on the back end of logistics?
Yeah, and learning about that has been really fascinating. Like,
Okay.
Personally, like as in, I was in whiskey for over 10 years, like coming up on 12, and I had to learn where corks come from. And I don't mean that they grow on trees and they take 30 years, which is really cool, to grow before they're ready in terms of for the cork that we know. Like, you think whiskey is aged? Forget that. You have to, 30 years for a cork tree to grow, and you have to shave the bark every 10 years. And who figured that out?
I did not know that either.
Somebody in Portugal. YouTube it. It's really wild. Like, they have to shave a cork tree every 10 years, and then on the third time they do it, it's like, oh, that's the bark we need.
That's wild.
How do you find that out?
So it's the bark that they use to make an actual cork with?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
As opposed to the
yeah.
cork being a fruit growing from
Right.
just harvesting corks. Oh wow, this is branded, amazing.
Leave it to me. So, right. So in that, have you like stocked up when you're like, I need X amount?
Yeah, and our lead time on corks is a year.
Shut up.
Yeah, now that's a unique situation. It was 6 months when we started, but now it's been pushed back to a year. With this glass, in January, I got a call saying we need to know all your glass numbers by March because we're going to do one production run, and then we'll do it next year. So
That's stressful.
yeah, well, there's crystal balling to it as well, and you go with it. But you obviously build in a buffer as well, and yeah, the time will go by too. So you're constantly, there are these decisions on quantities that come up, and it'll get easier. But because we're year one, it's a little bit like, ooh.
Right, yeah, really.
But when the years come, obviously there'll be growth, but you know you're not going to grow 900% or anything.
Sure.
Like that. There's a trajectory that you'll establish. So, but just doing the numbers on that and doing a bottoms up sales plan and then figuring out what the minimum quantity is on it, you get to that number quicker than you'd expect.
Sure.
So it just becomes an obvious number, because, like, let's say with corks, if I'm going to buy 30,000 corks, and it makes more price sense than buying 20,000 and then ordering another 10,000, you do the 30,000. So there's
Sure.
yeah. But learning about that has been fascinating, and what glass companies to work with. Because I remember doing my research on that, and I was asking different people, well, what are you using that glass company? I'm like, are they the best? Are they the quickest? Do they have the smoothest glass? What is it? And a lot of the time, they're really like, well, they just got back to us.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, yeah, okay. But so, like, I have spreadsheets on all these different glass companies and cork companies, and, just trying to do the detective work on why you would use one over the other. So
That's wild.
yeah.
So when we first started talking, you said that you went into this endeavor because your cocktail failed. Do you want to talk to us about the cocktail, like what it was, or is it just like, no, it's not good?
No, it'd be a waste of time. So, but I'm glad it did.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe if it had been a success, I still would have come up with the whiskey anyway.
So what is a good cocktail that this does go with? Have you heard feedback from bartenders that are like, this is a great one for this specific whiskey?
Yeah, like we do a lot of whiskey sours and stuff like that, but I think probably the best performers would be, it's always going to do well in old fashions, but Manhattan's it works out really well in. But a lot of bartenders have been having fun pulling out or dialing up the rum notes that come with this. So I thought this as well, like they were like doing a lot of rum cocktails with this whiskey. So
Interesting.
Yeah, like a daiquiri. Yeah.
It does. It's wild how if you sit down and you appreciate this, which is, we talk about price, and that's one of your best sellers is because how cheap this is. But when you go up in price,
Affordable.
yeah, you try affordable. That is not cheap, right? Yeah. So as you go up in price, you want to sit back and appreciate it more, so you can try to get these notes out. But with it being $40 and you sit there, you want to drink it quick because it's so good. But if you take a step back and you really analyze what this tastes like, it's wild how many different notes you can pick up from different barrels. Like this isn't just a throw it into a fruitcake and this is what you got. This is seriously very well blended together where you can taste every single note from the barrels. Like it's a single barrel.
Yeah.
That's so wild to me.
Yeah.
It's so well done.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank
nice
you.
job.
I'm glad
Really nice
Ashley's
job.
enjoying it. Otherwise, just be me, And that family effort would really be demanding a lot from the family.
Yeah. So
you-
thirsty.
So you have somebody in California, you have somebody in Texas. How did Illinois and what was the other one?
Florida.
Florida. How did those come about?
Yeah, and so think back to when I was covering Tullamore Dew.
Sure.
And I did that for 10 years. And I knew I covered coast to coast, city to city, always with a bottle of whiskey in hand. So a lot of my contacts would have been in Chicago. Florida is lovely too. So I was like, okay, if we can only go into so many states, let's be smart about it. They're also the biggest states too. But they're where I have a lot of my relationships from before. So it's like, okay, let's start there. And I'm very conscious of not spreading ourselves too thin. As much as I would love to and will need to go to Massachusetts, I want to wait until Jack, Donna, and myself have spent a right amount of time getting those 5 states ready so that, we can take 2 weeks and go to Massachusetts and introduce people to that. So it's like step by step, slow and steady, and it's just doing the right things at the right time. So like we only want to work with a few bars in the beginning, get it going, have it become their favorite Irish whiskey, introduce their bar staff to it. But we also want them to know us. We would hate to be like, here's Lost Irish, here's what it's all about, buy it, bye-bye, never see you again. So we make an effort of going back to the same place again and again, and they should have our phone number. They should have follow us on Instagram, vice versa, and just do it that way. So, like, this is my second time in Buffalo this year, and I want to be back kind of every 3 months. Is the intention, and be back for not just a day.
Right.
Yeah.
So with you working at Connemara before this, do you have any ambitions on putting any peat or smoke into your whiskey at all, or no?
No. Yeah, I do think there is a time and a place for peat, but I don't believe peat would work well with Lost Irish, and it's similar. Why, like if I was looking heavily at having a 46 or a 43 ABV on this whiskey, ultimately it didn't taste as good as the 40%, and it would have taken away from the cast story. So I think adding peat in there would probably do a real discredit to what we've done. So no, as much as I do like peat finishes, this isn't the right way.
Yeah, it would be very overwhelming for your palate to have that and then try to decipher all the flavors from the barrels.
Yeah,
so
you'd miss out whether it's the barrels or you'd miss out on the peat. I don't think it would work for this. Yeah.
So we recently just touched on your social media. Do you want to talk about where you are on social media, your handles and all that, so everybody can follow?
Follow Lost Irish Whiskey, and then very simply, Lost Irish Tim. With the nickname of Get Lost Tim. Didn't take long for my mates to come up with that, but slide into the DMs, do the comments, and we're coming to a town near you at some point. And if you aren't in one of the 5 states we are, you can also go to reservebar.com, and I believe we deliver to 31 states way too. And then if ever you're in Ireland, don't be shy, I'm either there, or I'm more than happy to recommend a good pub and boozer to go to as well.
Yeah, that being said, where's your book available so everybody can find it, and if they are going to Ireland, to go pick it up?
Yeah, so it's From Barley to Blarney, a Whiskey Lover's Guide to Ireland. You can find it on Amazon, all good bookstores, and some shitty ones too.
Is it only available hardcover?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hardcovers are the best.
100% agree.
And then with there's tons of images, and there's 294 photos in that book as well. So you can see the pubs, you can see the stills, you can see the distillery. So, yeah, if you want to make money on a book, don't put in photos. And also, live in the country you're writing the book on.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's been awesome. Anything we didn't touch on? Okay, so one more thing. If somebody is looking up where in the States they can find you, is that on your website, or do they have to go to their specific liquor store?
Any liquor store in those 5 states can can order it. It is available for them to order from the distributor. And I'd say the best is just to contact us on Lost Irish Instagram or Facebook, because then we can go, listen, this is the nearest liquor store to you.
Sure.
Or Reserve Bar as well will deliver it to your door, so you're a few clicks away.
Love it. Yeah. Anything we didn't touch on that you want to talk about before we close it out?
Well, I do want to know what your favorite Buffalo pubs are, so that I can plan my evening.
Favorite Buffalo pubs. What do you look? Are you looking for dinner, or are you looking for whiskey?
No, for whiskey.
Okay, so there's this one lucky day.
I'm there tomorrow.
You're there tomorrow?
Yeah,
It's
I've been
solid.
before. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
It's a solid one. Anything else that really specializes or has a good Irish whiskey or bourbon selection? Neat and Vice are good. They're actually, it's right down the street from here.
Yeah,
it's pretty close.
Down the road.
Neat, yeah.
Great name.
That's very good. They have a pretty good whiskey selection and like a locker thing too, where you can hold your whiskey. But if you're going to be in the South Towns at all, there's this bar called 189. They pride themselves on having a very good whiskey selection as well.
Amazing.
So
great. Let's see if we can add to their selection.
There you go. Love it.
Yeah.
Brilliant, lads.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This is awesome. Everybody go check out Lost Irish. If you're looking for a good experience with Irish whiskey that is very affordable, go check them out. It's Lost Irish Whiskey, and you'll see it probably on our show in a few weeks as well. This has been amazing, man. I'm so excited. I love all the flavors to this. This is just fantastic.
Amazing, lads.
So, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.